Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Karen McKinney. Joe Biden is committing you, dear taxpayer, to paying for the full cost of rebuilding the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland. I guess he's not even going to wait to see how much insurance can cover or how much the state and local governments have on hand for disaster recovery. Obviously, he doesn't want another East Palestine mess on his hands right before November, so he wants Americans to know that Joe will get it done. Literally saying during a White House press conference that we're not leaving until this job gets done. And when Joe says he'll get it done, well, he means at your expense, and most likely overpriced and way over schedule, if any past government project is something to go off of. As always, it turns out that this cargo ship, the Dolly, had been involved in a prior incident back in 2016 when it hit a stone loading pier in the port of Antwerp, Belgium. Subsequent inspections, one even as recent as last year, came back showing deficiencies when it came to structural conditions like damage to the hull, impairing seaworthiness, as well as deficiencies with the propulsion and auxiliary machinery of the vessel, meaning the gauges, thermometers, and other similar devices on board. There is that incompetency crisis for you that we were talking about last night. At least when the crew realized they were losing power, they were able to signal a Mayday alert that allowed authorities to block off traffic to the bridge, saving countless lives. Though, of course, our thoughts and prayers are with the 6 construction crew members who were on the bridge as it collapsed and who are now assumed to be deceased. And just to rub even more salt in the wound, the Associated Press is essentially asking its readers to question the namesake historical figure behind the bridge in the first place, arguing, quote, his personal history has made him a controversial figure in some quarters. In June 2020, a statue of him in San Francisco was taken down, end quote. Our friend Jeremy Carl of the Claremont Institute called it yesterday when he posted, quote, minor point amidst the tragedy, but if you think the new bridge is going to be named after a slave owner who cares that he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, but Francis Scott Key, I have the remains of the Key Bridge to sell you. Kwesi Fume Bridge, here we come. And yes, Fume is a real guy. He's a Democrat representing the 7th Congressional District of Maryland in the U.S. House of Representatives, so that could easily be a real possibility. But before we get into the interview tonight, allow me to point out a few other fun historical pieces of trivia. Francis Scott Key may have owned a few slaves during his lifetime, but he actually argued against the peculiar institution during a case before the Supreme Court. He also successfully defended Aaron Burr's co-conspirators against treason charges. The Washington Post, back in the good old pre-woke days of 1987, wrote, quote, Key got a reputation for emphasizing style over legal substance, but in Washington, style can go a long way. A congressman accused Sam Houston of defrauding the government. Houston in turn caned the congressman, and the House of Representatives dragged him to trial. Key defended Houston and attacked not so much the Congress as the press, which had portrayed Houston as a brute. Not so, cried Key, insisting that Houston had once indeed an arm fit to execute the strong impulses of a brave heart, but that arm he had given to his country. On the field of one of her most perilous battles, it had been raised in her defense. Key's defense changed Houston from bully to crippled vet, and Congress let him off with a reprimand. Key's performance impressed Houston's buddy, President Andrew Jackson, who appointed Key U.S. Attorney for Washington. Key promptly set about closing down the gambling dens that line Pennsylvania Avenue, end quote. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers the historical spotlight I did on that Houston case a while back, but it was a fun one. It was a wild ride.